Right, well, let's speak to Chris Doyle, Director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding and a commentator on Middle East affairs, joining us live now from London. Mr. Chris Doyle, thank you for your time. So Tariq's report there highlighting the mass killings at GHF sites. So what do you think is the real motive here behind the establishment of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, especially considering the reporting we're seeing in the Israeli media about soldiers ordering to fire on civilians who pose absolutely no threat?
Well, it is an abomination, an utter disgrace, an inversion of all the global humanitarian principles about independence and impartiality, neutrality. And the reason it was set up is simply because Israel was under pressure, given its 11-week-old blockade of the Gaza Strip. All 0.23 million Palestinians were denied food, water, medication, all forms of humanitarian aid. So in order to get round that and not allow the UN humanitarian agencies in, the associated agencies, they created these militarized, securitized hubs, 4 of them. There used to be 400 distribution centers in Gaza, and they became death traps. As we've seen, around about 550 Palestinians have been killed in trying to get food there, to travel by foot, long journeys, and then the families worry whether they'll ever come back again. This should never, ever have been allowed to have been set up or established when there is a proper, effective aid mechanism at the ready, at the borders with the UN agencies and others. So this really is a continuation of that blockade. It is a way of trying still to put huge pressure on Palestinian civilians, using starvation as a policy of war, because in those parcels, the boxes that they pick up, there's no water and there's no fuel. And the food, the number of meals, is not sufficient to feed the population of the Gaza Strip. The elderly, the infirm, those who've been injured can't get there. So, unfortunately, it's another example of where Israel enjoys complete and utter impunity from any of the norms of war, of international law. And this has to be dismantled now, and the proper systems of delivery and distribution of aid set back up.
And Mr. Doyle, no ceasefire now for the longest time. Complete stalemate, with Netanyahu clearly prolonging this war despite protests, not just abroad, but also domestically. And now we have a Trump speculating that there could be a ceasefire in Gaza within a week even. And also an Israeli newspaper has reported that the deal could expand the Abraham Accords with regional countries, including Syria. Now, the question is, what's changed, if at all? And do you see Netanyahu agreeing to a ceasefire in the first place?
I think we have a long way to go, sadly, until we get to a ceasefire. Many hurdles to jump over. And this, I think, is coming from the Trump administration, trying to build on what they see as the success with Iran, the way in which, the president got that ceasefire after Israel's aggression, and to try to put pressure on Hamas, on others, to secure some form of ceasefire. But what you're not hearing is how they are going to actually get the aid back into Gaza, how they're going to reconstruct Gaza, how they're going to liberate Palestinians from the yoke of occupation and end that genocide. It is all about how you get a ceasefire for Israel, how you get normalized relations between Israel and some of his neighbors, and indeed, I'm afraid, how you get Donald Trump to get a Nobel Peace Prize. So they have it inverted. They're doing it the wrong way around. There needs pressure on Israel to stop the military operations, to go back to the ceasefire deal that was agreed, in fact, back in January, and to get to, yes, the release of hostages, but also Palestinian detainees, but as a matter of urgency to allow the United Nations to do its proper work. If you do not put pressure on Israel, we will not get a proper ceasefire that means that Palestinians' lives can somehow start returning to dignity and decency, and they can try to recover from this genocide. Moreover, there's got to be accountability at the end of all of this, and nobody's talking about that. A proper investigation and accountability for those who committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. And once again, the White House is never going to be talking about that. And that's one reason why Israel will continue to escalate on every front, the continued bombings of Lebanon and Syria. It's a very mixed picture.
And speaking of a lack of accountability, we're certainly seeing this with Israel's occupation in the West Bank. It's worsening. Can you clarify the connection between what's taking place in Gaza with the expansion of land grabbing in the occupied West Bank and, of course, East Jerusalem as well, restriction of movement and these constant settler attacks that do go unpunished and, if anything, encouraged?
Netanyahu wants to escalate on every front. In many ways, people have speculated that one of the reasons that he ordered the attacks on Iran was to divert and deflect attention from the horrors of what was going on in Gaza. And I think the fear is now that Iran and Israel are pulled into a ceasefire, maybe there'll be talks with Iran, that actually the Israeli attention will go to escalate in the West Bank even further. And you're going to see even more violent settler attacks on Palestinian villages. You're going to see even more demolitions. They've been going on apace, even more land grabs. And of course, you know, Israeli military operations have been going apace in the northern part of the West Bank, particularly in refugee camps. Well, those operations can certainly be expanded. And this is all a part also of Netanyahu wanting to hold on to power, to keep that coalition together. He can keep those right-wing extremists tied into his coalition if he makes progress in their eyes in the West Bank, and giving them more control and ending any possibility, of course, of a Palestinian state. Because, of course, before the whole Iran conflict, there was going to be an international conference where many major powers may well have recognized an independent state of Palestine. So this fits absolutely within Netanyahu's strategy, his long-term vision. He wants the West Bank to eventually be annexed formally to Israel. Effectively, it already is. And to put an end to all the Palestinian nationalist dreams. Now, the question is, does he get away with it? Well, based on what we have seen in the last 20 months, he's got every reason to believe he can.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Mr. Chris Doyle, Director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding and a commentator on Middle East affairs.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.